Hopefully we can start our for you guys Monday with a smile here. So let's see here. Several men were in the locker room of the gym when a cell phone on a bench rang, and a man put it on his speaker and begins to talk. Everyone else in the room stopped to listen. The man was like, "Hello? Hi, honey, it's me. Are you at the club?" "Yes." "I'm at the shops now and found this beautiful leather coat. It's only $2,000. Is it okay if I buy it?" "Sure, go ahead if you like it that much." Then she's like, "I also stopped by the Lexus dealership and saw the new models. I saw one I really liked." The guy's like, "How much?" "90,000. "Okay, but for that price, I want it with all the options." "Great. Oh, and one more thing. I was just talking to Janie and found out that the house I wanted last year is back on the market. They're asking $980,000 for it." "Well, then go ahead and make an offer for $900,000. They'll probably take it. If not, we can go the extra $80,000 if it's what you really want." "Okay, I'll see you later. I love you so much. Bye, I love you too." The man hung up. The other men in the locker room were staring at him in astonishment, mouths wide open. He turned and asked, "Anyone know whose phone this is?" All right.
That's hilarious.
Okay, so Bishop W. Christopher Waddell in conference this last weekend, he said this: "The Lord has provided direction to help his people prepare spiritually and temporally against the calamities and trials that he knows will come as part of this mortal experience. We are blessed to be led by prophets who understand the need for us to prepare against the calamities which should come." And then he said, "The Lord does not expect us to do more than we can do, but he does expect us to do what we can do when we can do it." I loved his talk. I'm not super good with like the food storage thing. I have lots of like canned foods and things like that, but you know, just thinking about everything that's going on, it's not even that I'm really worried about like food storage per se. You know, I was worried about toilet paper for a couple of days when the whole toilet paper thing happened. But I just think about my kids. I think about my kids. I think about my wife. I think about the world that we live in and that I'm raising them in, and the need to be close to the Lord. And every time General Conference rolls around, I'm just so grateful for inspired leaders who are led by our Savior directly. And I testify that as we seek to heed their counsels, we are following our Savior's example. And with that, we will be able to feel his Spirit guiding us in our lives. So, all right, Carolyn, go ahead.
Our dear Father in heaven, we are so grateful to thee for all that thou hast given us. We're especially grateful for this time we have to gather together as a class that we may be able to be enlightened and acquire knowledge we need to work on our schoolwork this week. We're grateful for the opportunity we have to be furthering our educations, and we pray that thou will bless us with open minds and clear vision that we can understand the principles that we're being taught. And we pray all these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Carolyn. All right, so 3 things that I want to do today. 1, I want to go through the chapter 3 quiz. There were a couple of questions about that as far as which answers were right. 2, I had a couple of slides that I wanted to show you. And 3, I wanted to write some code with you guys. I'm really excited to be in week 4. I feel like cit160 takes a couple weeks to kind of get moving, and I love JavaScript. So I'm excited that we've made it this far in the course. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And we'll start with this quiz. All right, can you guys see the screen? Awesome. Okay, that should be obvious. That should be obvious. Okay, what version of HTML will we use in this course? It is HTML5. If you're wondering what this is, by the way, it's called a regular expression. They're extremely powerful tools. You can Google it sometime. Sadly, we won't touch it in this class. But the correct answer is HTML5. Write the HTML5 document type declaration as it should appear at the top of all HTML5 documents. Include the surrounding less than and greater than symbols in your answer. So if I was just going to write this, and blow this up a little bit, what that should look like is just that. Okay, that's the correct answer for number 4. Next one, what is the first tag? Whoops, I don't want to edit that. The first tag in an HTML document. Include the surrounding lesser than and greater than symbols in your answer. Okay. Our first tag is going to be just HTML. Okay. And it will most likely also have lang and then a language specified there as well. Now, you don't have to have this. HTML is a tag. This language is an attribute of this tag. And so if you submitted this answer and you only had HTML there, or even if you had doc type there, I'm fine with either one of those answers. Go ahead and send Nicholas a message and be like, hey, I should have gotten that right. Okay. What are the two main sections that every HTML5 document must have? It is the head and the body. H1 and paragraph, they look like this. We have a P for paragraph and H1. Those will both have closing tags as well. And these are great, but they're not required. That is required. These two aren't required. Okay. But inside of an HTML document, I always need to have a head. The head will have a closing tag, and it'll also have a body, and the body will also have a closing tag. If I did have a header and a paragraph, they would be inside the body like that. All of these would be inside the HTML tag, and it would look like that. Okay. These are not required. Okay. I could have a body that's empty. I could have a body that just has an input. Okay. But the head and the body, they do have to be there for a valid HTML5 document. Inside which section does the title tag belong? Inside the head. So if I was going to add title here, it would look like this. Also with the closing tag. I should be doing this in an HTML document. I actually had some questions about that this week. So several people asked why they couldn't see the colors here. Okay. So I'm going to hit Control S to save this. And here's why. So I'm just going to save this. I'll just go to my documents and I'll call this lecture for temp.html. Okay. This .html is what really matters. If you don't want to type that, you can just click on this and click on HTML. The effect will be the same. But once you save that as an HTML file, there's our syntax highlighting that we're expecting. Okay, I can add a value inside of this title. Okay, and that would show up in the tab of my document. But yeah, you won't see any of the syntax highlighting or errors unless it's saved as an HTML document. Question in the chat. Having a problem with 8 and 11. Okay, we are getting there. So number 8, what is the tag to begin the largest type of heading, including the surrounding less than and greater than symbols in your answer? Okay, the largest type of heading. We looked at headings last week. We saw that there were headings. If I just type in H in here, this is also because it's saved as an HTML document. It'll show everything that I could, like all the different tags that I have access to in HTML. You can see I have H1 through H6. These are my 6 different headings. Okay, and so if I just click on H1 there, you can see it wrote out the opening and closing tag for this. H1 is the largest tag. The answer to this question is just this right here, line 7. Okay, I don't have to have it in quotes. I don't have to have the closing tag. It just says, what is the tag to begin the largest type of heading? And that would be this right here. Okay. Number 9, what is the tag to begin a paragraph? Okay, we looked at that a second ago. This is to begin and end a paragraph. So just to begin a paragraph would be that right here. Lesser than, P, greater than. Okay. Number 10, write the HTML tag and its attributes for creating a text field, including the surrounding less than and greater than symbols in your answer. Okay, so we have our input right here. That's not a text field. Let me put this closing tag back. I should put that closing tag back as well. So a text field, we're creating a text field. Okay, that's it right here, line 8. That is the input to create a text field. Now it says, and its attributes. Okay, if you look in your book, you'll never see an input that's just an input like this. You'll always see that it also has a type, generally of text. Okay, there are other things that you can do. We won't really look at those. But every example that you see in your book, anytime there's an input, this is what it looks like. And so that's the correct answer for number 10.
Brother Birch, I have a quick question about.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Sorry, Shara. So I know some students have put, or also, sorry for everyone to hear my voice. I threw I work at Haunted Maze and I scream all night for like 5 hours, so my voice is gone. So I know some students I put instead of input equal type equals text, they did text area type equals text. Is either one acceptable?
Yes. Yep. If you, Nicholas, you're going to be grading these. If they put a text area right here, it doesn't say it has to be an input. It says a text field. A text area is definitely a text field. So great question. Cher, what's up?
So for this one, I messaged Nicholas about it earlier in the week, but in the book, the input had two attributes. It had like an ID and a type text, and so it marked it wrong. But like I don't know, I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah, I'm
is
glad
that okay or not?
that's totally okay. Okay. Right here it says, and its attributes. Okay. You guys, this is an older course and there are some things in it that kind of drive us all crazy. I apologize for that. So I think its answer is actually only looking for this single attribute, but you're always going to use an ID with your inputs. If you want to use data from a user inside of JavaScript, you're going to have, or at least you should have an ID there. And so, yeah, if you have an ID, you could even have some other attributes as well. And I'd be like, yes, this is totally a text field with some tags, and that's totally fine. So,
Thank you.
yeah. All right, number 11, write the opening HTML tag and its attributes for creating a button. Include the surrounding lesser than and greater than signs in your answer. Okay, so we have a button right here, and that's the opening and closing tag. By the way, if you're wondering how I did that so fast, I start typing this out and I see that the first selected thing here is button. If I just hit tab, it completes it with the opening and closing tag, which is really nice. So tab. Anyways, we don't care about this for our answer. It only asks for the opening HTML tag and its attributes. Okay, so I would probably have a type of button in here, and I might have an ID. Okay, so I would have to have attributes there as well. Okay, but again, it only wants the open tag, so that's all you'd have to submit. Number 12, what is the HTML attribute that a developer can use to uniquely identify each HTML document element? Okay, well, that's why we're using an ID here, so that I can retrieve data from an input. So anytime I want to uniquely identify anything, I would use ID. So for this answer, the only thing that it's looking for are those two letters, ID. That's it. Because that's the name of the attribute. Number 13, what are the characters that begin an HTML document? Okay, so right here, if I look at this HTML document, we have this right here. And so our characters, which be these. Okay, these are the characters that begin an HTML document. What is the tag that ends an HTML document? Okay, we have that right here. All right, this doc tag doesn't have a closing tag, but this HTML does have a closing tag, and that is always what will end an HTML document. You'll never have anything below that. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and dive into our slideshow here. Okay, JavaScript can be executed from a number of different events. When the page loads, when the user clicks something, when the mouse moves, when a certain time requirement is met. In this class, 99% of what we're going to do is when the user clicks something. Okay, usually we're just going to have a button, and when you click the button, you call a JavaScript function. Okay, all a JavaScript function is just a chunk of JavaScript code that will be executed when you push a button. Okay, now these events can be triggered by other things. I could have a JavaScript function run as soon as a page loads. That'd be just fine. Let's look at a couple of these real quick. So I'm going to come back over to my text editor. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to open up, close all that. I'm going to open up cit160, and we're in chapter 4. I'm just going to make a new file here, and I'll call it lecture for temp.html. Another cool little trick in VS Code, if you type in exclamation mark, in an HTML file and hit tab, it kind of makes a little HTML template for you, which is really nice. Okay, so to run JavaScript in the browser, all right, you'll have an HTML file, and inside of the head tag, you need a script tag. All right, so I have my script tag, I have my HTML document, it looks really nice. If I run this, let me just put a header here. So we can say this is our code. I'll save that. And then document 1 I'll have for our title. If I copy this path, go back to our browser. Okay, here's our header, H1. This is our code. And here's my title, document 1. All right, HTML 101 from last week. We don't have any JavaScript in here yet. This is really simple. You guys all did this last week. So let's throw in some JavaScript. All right. In here, inside of the script tag, if I try to write HTML, watch what happens. I'm going to put an H2 tag in here. Notice first that it's not completing this. All right. If I type in H2 down here, tab, and it's there. Okay. If I try to type in H2 right here, there's no like little drop down showing what I want to do. But if I try to put that there anyways and just ignore my text editor here, I'm going to hit save, and it's already open in the browser, so I'm just going to hit refresh. Now nothing changed, but if I right click and click on inspect, or if I hit F12, you can see that there's an error here in the console. Okay, this big red X showing up here, and it says unexpected token, this lesser than sign, and I can click on that and see where it is in the code. Okay, and that's because it's actually trying to run JavaScript, which is a programming language. It's trying to execute it, and it's like, oh, this, I have no idea what this lesser than sign is doing here, and it throws this error. If I wanted to say run a JavaScript function in here, a very simple example of a JavaScript function is the alert function. All right, it's just built into JavaScript. You don't have to write it. You know, I could Google this and say JavaScript alert, and W3 schools comes up, and I can say, okay, the alert method displays an alert box with a specified message and an OK button. Okay, well, let's try it ourselves. Click on this, click try it. Oh, look at that. That's like a nice little pop-up box, and I can hit OK to close it. All right, that is what the alert function does. Notice the event that triggered it. I click the button. All right, this button is written in HTML, and it has an attribute called onClick that then has a function name. This function name matches something inside of our script tag in our HTML document, so that when we push that button, it goes and looks in the script for a function that with that name, finds it, and then runs that function. In this case, it just ran this single line of code, alert, hello, I am an alert box. And so click on it, hello, I'm an alert box. Okay, so that's a really simple example of basically what you're going to be doing this whole semester. All right, you have a button that will call a function. When you click it, it will find code inside of your script tag and run that code. All right. Now, if we go back and look at this, we still have this error showing up in our console. All right, and I have alert, and I'll say, hello, this is another text box. Okay. I'll put a semicolon there because it's JavaScript, and that I need that to end my statement correctly. And I'll hit refresh, and notice I still have my error there. Nothing happens. I didn't have an alert box. So I need to fix that error first. So I'm going to take this out. Shift delete is a hotkey for deleting an entire line of code. And I'll hit Control S to save it. Okay, so now the only thing in my script tag is just this alert line of code. All right. And so I'm going to come back over here, hit refresh. And now you can see it says, this page says, hello, this is another text box. Now, notice it says this is still running. And that's because technically this function hasn't finished yet. It'll finish once I hit OK, and then it'll load up the rest of my page. But notice what triggered this function. I don't have a button in my code. All right. Instead, I just have this function that will run by default as soon as the page gets loaded. Okay. So if you think about it, our browser that is capable of reading HTML code and rendering JavaScript code, it finds this HTML file, lecture4temp.html, and it runs it, and it goes through each line of code in here. It sees, oh, it's going to be an HTML document in the English language. We have these meta tags, and then it has a script. Okay, and it's like, okay, well, let's go ahead and run this function real quick while we're here, and it'll just run it by default. If I had this function written several times and I hit refresh over here, it'll just run each one until it's all done. And then once this is all finished, then it'll go ahead and basically display all of our HTML code on the page. Now, this is perfectly valid JavaScript, but we won't be doing it very often. You might do it like once in this class, but we won't be doing it very often. Because generally we want to be able to have a little more control with that. And we want to be able to like actually have a button, okay, that a user can click whenever they want to. And when they do it, then we'll go ahead and call a function. Okay. Now, if you're curious, if I wanted to, you know, in this onClick attribute of HTML, I could put JavaScript right here. You know, this is technically a function call. This is JavaScript code that's saying I'm going to execute a function. So if I wanted to, technically, I could move this up to here, and I could totally run JavaScript there. The only thing that I'd have to change is just these double quotes. I have to change those to single quotes, that this whole thing could be inside of the onClick attribute as its value. But then in here, I could actually take this out. I have nothing in my script. Hit run, hit try it, and it'll still run it. Okay, so this onClick attribute of our button is like a bridge to JavaScript. I could put as much JavaScript in here as I wanted, but it's really ugly to put it in the button, so don't do that. The better way to do it is to say, okay, I have one function that I'm going to call for my button. And then inside of that function in my JavaScript, I could put as many things as I wanted. If I wanted like 50 alerts, I could do it. I wouldn't have to put 50 alerts inside of my HTML button. Okay. So anyways, the other two ways that we looked at, when the mouse moves, we're not going to look at that, and when a certain time requirement is met. If we wanted to set a little timer for 5 seconds and then have a little pop-up that says, do you want to subscribe to our emails? Lots of websites do that. Okay, and that's how they do it, just with a very simple timer. All right, comments. What are they for? Notes, tips, documentation, code to be used at a later date. All right, so there are two types of comments. We looked at comments last week in HTML, and we also have comments in JavaScript. All right, and they're generally used for the exact same thing. All right, comments aren't rendered by a compiler. They're not rendered or executed in your browser. Comments are for you, the programmer, to use. And so in my file right here, if I wanted to put a comment in HTML, we learned about this last week, it would look like this. And I could put anything in here that I wanted to. I could be like, oh, the following line of code is a header or something, which would be really redundant, and I don't really want to comment like that. But that's how we do it in HTML. Once I get inside of the script tag, again, this is JavaScript. It's not going to be HTML anymore. And so if I try to do this again, this is a comment. Look at all these red lines popping up all over the place. Okay, we can predict what's going to happen. It'll be the exact same thing as when I tried to put the H1 tag in here. It was like unexpected token, this lesser than sign, it's an error, and we're not going to run any JavaScript because of it. Okay, if I run this in my browser and hit refresh, oh, whoops. Hang on. All right, my thing's like wonking out. It'll show this error and it won't be able to run it. Okay, this actually isn't a comment in JavaScript. So for a comment in JavaScript, notice my syntax highlighting. My red error is gone, and it just turned this green instead of like that blue and white that it was for HTML. This is a single line comment. Okay, and that works just fine. There's one other type of comment in JavaScript, and it's called a multi-line comment. That starts with a / asterisk. Notice how it just made all of this green. Okay, watch this again. If I type in a / asterisk, it'll make all that green because I haven't closed my multi-line comment. So currently, this entire thing is a comment. None of this code will get executed. All right, so once I want to end that comment, I can put an asterisk / and now you can see here's my multi-line comment. Okay, starting with the / asterisk and ending with the asterisk / and then I have code that will actually get executed. All right. So you might be wondering, well, why would I need to do this? Okay. A lot of the time, if I look at like one of my other assignments here, you can see I have a couple assignment or a couple of comments. One, I have something called a defining table. This will help me kind of plan out my algorithms like we talked about in week 2 to figure out the best way to do things. So if I had a program that was like compute the area of a square, something really simple, the input would have to be one of the dimensions, either the length or the width of our square. Our processing would be that value squared. And then the output would be the area, whatever value we computed from the processing. Okay, this is a defining table. You're going to learn about these this week, and you're going to use them for the rest of the semester. So every one of your JavaScript programs inside of the script tag will have a function or more. Later on in the semester, you'll have multiple functions. But at the top, you'll also have a multi-line comment. Notice it starts with the / asterisk and ends with the */. And inside of it, you'll have input, processing, and output to basically function as like a roadmap for your JavaScript logic that will take place. All right, more JavaScript stuff. So we have statements in our algorithms week. In week 2, we talked about like recipes, steps in a recipe, sentences in a paragraph, things like that. Statements are just single lines of code. This right here is a single statement. All right. In this case, I'm executing a single function. It ends with a semicolon. If we look back at W3 schools, you can see right here we have a function statement, which has a bunch of statements inside of it. So that when this function gets called, when the user clicks on it, on that button that calls the function, all of these different statements will get run. Okay. So JavaScript is just kind of like built out of all these different statements that when they run together, they should do something. It is a case-sensitive language. It's very case-sensitive. We can test this out. If I come over here and I say my function, and I capitalize my, and then I have function. If I run this and hit try it, nothing will happen. Okay, and that's because it's looking for my function, capital MY, inside of my script, and it doesn't exist. All right, if I made a new function, oops, called my function. Okay, notice I have to use the function keyword, the name of the function, parentheses, opening and closing, and then curly braces, opening and closing, to say where the function will actually end. And here I can say alert function 2, semicolon to end my statement. If I run this and hit try it, you can see it called that next function. All right, so JavaScript is a very case-sensitive language. It didn't even know that this function existed beforehand because the casing didn't match. All right. So in VS Code, there's a couple little tricks to kind of help you out. Let's say I had alert written right here, and I was going to try to call the alert function, but this is obviously the correct one. I can hit Control F in here to search for something, and if I click on this, it'll force it to match the case. Okay, notice now it's saying I only have 3 instances of this text alert. Okay, these 2 that are commented out, and this one right here. It doesn't even match this one anymore because it's not matching the case because I clicked on this guy. Okay, now the reason why I'm showing you this is because when you have a button, make a button real quick, and we'll say on click, and we'll call test function. All right, up inside my script, I need to make a function called test function. And in here, we'll go ahead and just stick that alert in there, and we'll take all that out. Okay, so my script has just a very simple function, very similar to the one that we saw in W3 schools. In my case, mine is called test function. Now, if I hit Control F to find, you can see I have this button clicked, so I'm matching the case, and there are 2 instances of it, which means when I click on this button, it's going to call this function. Okay, if I change this to like a capital T, actually, let's just change that whole thing to capital. So I have test function, and if I search for this, now you can see it only has 1 instance. It's this one down here. It's kind of highlighted. Okay, and if you ever see that, then you know that this one won't get called. And I'm only pointing this out because this is a really common error. Anytime you have a name of a function down here or an ID that you're trying to reference, it all has to be exact. and lots of issues can come up. Well, things just won't work if they don't match. All right, case sensitive, declare variables. Okay, so if I wanted to declare a variable, let's go back to this code here, and I'm going to say calculate area. Okay, and then I'm just going to copy and paste this. It'll help me not make typos. And then in here, I'm going to say var width equals 10 and var height equals 20. Oops. Okay, what this is doing is it is storing 10 and 20 into my computer's memory. All right, so we all have RAM in our computers, and that is used for moments like this, when a piece of data has to be saved temporarily to be used in the near immediate future. Okay, so right now I'm saving the data 10 and 20 into my computer, and I'll be able to access those pieces of data by the variable names, width and height. So right here, if I said alert width, okay, I'm able to use that variable name width, and it should just throw up a pop-up in my window that just says 10. Let's go ahead and test this. So I'm going to come back over here, and I'll hit refresh. Okay. Oh, there's my little button. It's so small because I didn't put a value for the text that goes in the button, so it's just really small. I don't have any errors in my console, which is good. And I'm going to click on my button, and this page says 10. Okay. Notice my button is what called that function. Okay. I have the button on click. As soon as I click it, it'll look for calculate area inside of my script. It found it, declared the variable width, and then alerted that width to the user. Okay. So after I declare variables, I can actually do something with them. If I wanted to say our area equals width times height, that is perfectly valid code. And then I could say, I'm actually going to alert the area instead. And we'll just take that width of 10 and the height of 20, multiply them, and assign that value to area. And then we'll go ahead and display area. So I'm going to come back over here, hit refresh, hit our button, and now it says 200. Okay. And so JavaScript is very capable of declaring variables and doing something with those variables. Another really good example is string concatenation. So right here, we did what's called arithmetic, right? Where I take two numeric values and I do math with them. But let's say I had something else. Let's say I had var name equals Jenny. And then down here, I want to say alert name plus is awesome. Okay. Now notice this syntax right here. I have the variable name, just like I had before when I used the alert box to display the area. Well, if I want to tie that to text, okay, if I want to actually like display something else, or if I wanted to say, you know, the area equals 200 or something like that, that would be string concatenation. And anytime we want to concatenate strings, we have to have this plus right here. These spaces aren't required. If I didn't want them, I wouldn't have to have them, but I think it looks nicer with the spaces. The only thing that's required is this plus, okay? And then whatever string I'm going to attach needs to be in quotes, okay? Now, let's run this and see what it looks like. Hit refresh, hit our button, and we have a nice display here that says Jenny is awesome, okay? Now, notice here I have a space. This is very literal, all right? If I don't have that space and I hit refresh and I hit our button, all right, Jenny is awesome, but we don't have anyone named Jenny is, all right? We missed our space there. So anytime you concatenate strings together, every character counts, all right? If I have several spaces in here, they'll get computed. Also, if I have multiple variables that I want to concatenate, I can, all right? I can say name plus name. It's not going to compute anything. If these were variables or if these were numbers, it might compute them. But where they're strings, it will just put those strings right next to each other. It will concatenate those strings. So I'm going to refresh it, hit our button again, and now you see it just says Jenny, Jenny. If I wanted a space between that, I would have to say plus a space plus Jenny. Okay, so I have name plus space in quotation marks plus Jenny. All right, so I'm gonna hit save, come back over here, hit refresh, hit our button, and now you can see we have that space there now between our name variable that we're gonna display twice. Now I could also say var space equals, and do that. And then in here I could say, oh, I'm gonna say name plus space plus name, because I just saved that space into a variable that I could then use anywhere I wanted to. So I can come back here, hit refresh, hit my button, and you can see we still have that space there, even though I'm saying a variable name. Now, one thing that's really, 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 really important to note is that right now, using variable names, I do not have any quotes. Look what happens if I put this in quotes. Color changes, it recognizes this as a string and not a variable, okay? Notice that all my variables here are the same color. They're all this nice sky blue, okay? The strings are this like kind of orangish brownish color, okay? The reason why that matters is because if I hit refresh, Jenny space Jenny, it actually printed the word space instead of using the variable, because space is as a string now. It's not referencing a variable name. So if I want to use the variable, I just say the variable, okay? But anytime I want to use like text, I have to put it in quotes, like we did here, okay? All right, let's look at what else we got. Pop-up windows alert, we already looked at that. Text fields instead of areas. Now guys, this looks like a lot, but we're gonna get there, okay? Right here, we're declaring a couple of variables. Okay, I have var name equals something, var scripture equals something. This document.getElementById though is not something that we've looked at. So let's explore a little bit. Let's come back over here. And I'm gonna put an input box right here, okay? Oh, that's nice. My text editor automatically put my text in there, my type of text. The one thing I will need though is ID equals, I'll say username. I could say anything I wanted to here for my ID. I could say George and Fred. Okay, it can be anything. So I have an input right here, and then I have a button, and I'm going to say greet user. I'm going to call that greet user. I'm going to make a new function down here called greet user. All right, and that's ready to go. It doesn't do anything yet, but I should be able to click on my button and call it. The one other thing I want to change right now, I don't like my button, how it's tiny, and so I'm going to say hello. Now, if I come back over here and hit refresh, I still have my header. I didn't change that. I have an input box that I can type in, and I have a button called say hello. Okay. So if I come back in here, I'm going to take this out. We don't need it anymore. We're not going to be using it. We can leave these. That's fine. And then I have input type text, ID equals username, and then button on click we'll call greet user. Now, if I want to get a value that the user types in here, okay, let me actually make sure this is working. That something looked a little funky a second ago. Okay, so let me type now. So let's say I have a name in here, and I hit say hello. I'm assuming this is calling my function. I don't know, but if I want to be able to use this name, then I have to be able to access this input by a unique ID. Okay, we have an ID called username. I can hit Control F on this username to search for it, and I can see that it's one of one. It's the only instance in my entire file that I have the string username. All right, so in here, if I want to be able to access that, I can say var name to assign a variable to it. But first I have to say document dot get element by ID. Okay, so document, if I actually, let me just go back for a sec. If I hit document dot, my text editor knows what all is in this document. Okay, there's all sorts of stuff. I could say document on touch start, document on submit, document on mouse move. Okay, this would do something anytime my mouse moves. Maybe it like returns the coordinates of my mouse. Okay, or on drop or on drag start. There are so many things in here. And 99% of them I have never used in my entire life. Okay, they're there. And when you have to use something, you Google how to do it, and you'll use like one of these things occasionally. It's like, oh, I need to use append, or I need to use adopt node. You know, for this class, pretty much all you're going to use is document dot get element by ID. Okay, and then it's going to look inside of the body of my document for an ID. And so I have a function call here. This is just get element by ID as a function. And in here, I'm going to say what ID I want to look for. Okay, well, I want to look for this guy right here. So I'm going to paste it right there. So I'm going to say document dot get element by ID. Now, if I hit dot again, look at all this stuff. That's insane. There's a lot of stuff in here. Okay, again, most of it you'll never use. All right, what you have to remember though is anytime you want to retrieve a value from the body of an HTML document, you will say dot value. Okay, and just semicolon. So document dot get element by ID, username, whatever ID it is, dot value, will retrieve whatever the user typed in this input box. Okay, now if I run this, nothing would happen still because I don't do anything with this. Okay, so I'm going to assign it to a variable called name. So I'm going to say variable name equals document.getElementById username.value. Okay, and for now, let's go ahead and just say alert name. And so if this works, it will alert whatever we type in the input box. Okay, so I hit save, and I hit refresh. I'm going to say Fred and say hello. You can see the page says Fred. All right, so we successfully ran an HTML document, called a function from the button, retrieved a value that the user typed in from an input box by using its unique ID, and then displayed that data on the page, or in this case, in the alert box. Okay, that is more or less what you're going to do for your assignment this week. Okay, we're talking about string concatenation. All right, line 8, we do the exact same thing that I just did. Document.getElementById, name input box, because it matches this ID on line 17, dot value. Retrieve the value from whatever the user typed in that input box. We set it to name. And then on line 9, 10, and 11, we just have some string concatenation. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a little bit of that. So instead of just alerting name, this function is called greet user. So I'm going to say var greeting equals, and then I'm going to have a nice greeting. I'll say hi there, comma, space, and then I'll concatenate the name, and then period. Good morning. All right, so I have some nice string concatenation going on here. All right, I have a string, a space to surround the name that the user typed in, and then a period, another space, and then I say good morning. And then instead of alerting name, I want to alert greeting. So I'm going to come back over here, hit refresh, say George. Okay, I'll do Nathan. Say hello. It says, hi there, Nathan. Good morning. Okay, and we have this nice little personalized greeting here. Okay, just by using a function call on a button, get element by ID to retrieve the value that the user typed in, string concatenation to make a variable called greeting, which we can call anything, and then we can alert that greeting. Now, if I wanted to, I could just put all of this into here, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, it makes this alert a little bit messier. I would prefer to have them in separate lines of code because if I ever wanted to change my greeting, it's very plainly right here. If I'm going to use this greeting in multiple places, I wouldn't have to copy and paste hi there name. I could just copy and paste the variable name greeting. Okay, but both would work. All right. The last thing that we're going to look at in this slide is that we don't have an alert here. Okay, instead it says document.getElementById output div dot inner HTML equals scripture. Okay, this scripture is a variable that was declared on line 9 with all of our string concatenation. And notice down here on line 19, we have a div with an ID called output div. So we're going to kind of mimic that. And in my HTML, first I'm going to make a div, and I'll say ID equals. I'll just say output. I'll say output greeting, or something like that. Again, a unique ID. Okay, so as long as this doesn't match any other ID, I could call this whatever I wanted to, but it makes sense to me to call it something like output greeting because that's what it's going to do. Then in here, no one likes pop-ups in their browsers. Okay, they drive people nuts. I have an extension installed in Chrome to block them. Okay, so we're not going to use alerts. Okay, instead, we're going to be able to display data directly into the page. And so with JavaScript, I can do all sorts of computations, in this case, string concatenation, and then say, okay, now spit it out back onto the page. So right here, I'm going to say document again, dot get element by ID, same exact thing as I did up here. Okay, I'm also going to have to isolate a unique ID again, just like I did up here. But this time it is called output greeting. Okay, now this will find my input box. All right, the reason why we had to use dot value up here is because that input box, just like document, has about 1 billion attributes, most of which you'll never touch. One of them is like input width and input height and the area it is on the page, and if it'll highlight when you hover over it, and all sorts of stuff, like 1 billion attributes. I'm not even kidding. But that value is what the user typed in, and that's what we want. That's what we need. This guy, though, we are isolating a div. All right. And so I say, all right, get element by ID, output greeting. And this time, I don't want to get anything out of the div. Instead, I want to put something into the div so that I can display something back to the user. So I'm going to say inner HTML, which will basically allow me to put something into that HTML there. And I'm going to say equals greeting. So I have document, get element by ID, output greeting. It finds this div. And then we say, okay, for the inner HTML of that div, let's go ahead and put that greeting. We'll assign it there, just like we do a variable. Okay. So I'm going to hit Control S to save. Come back over here, hit refresh. And I'm going to say Nathan again, say hello. It says, hi there, Nathan. Good morning. Okay, that's a lot better than a pop-up box that I have to close. All right, but now it's just displaying in the page. Now, if I wanted to, I could put other stuff in here. I could say, the display will be below. Hit save, hit refresh, and I can put my div anywhere I want to display something. Say hello, and it pops up down here. Okay, if I wanted to do some type of styling with this and make it pink or make it all the way on the right side of my page or anything, I could do that. Okay, I could come into here and say, oh, you know what? I'm actually going to put some style in here, and I'm going to say background color equals blue violet. Okay, and I hit refresh. Notice I don't see any blue violet down here. It's because there's nothing in the div yet. But as soon as I type in George and hit say hello, now I can see exactly where my div's at. And if it's hard to see, we have this hi there, George, good morning, string written. That was from our greeting variable. Okay. All right, any questions up to this point? Okay, you guys, I know this is a lot. Okay, what we just did is like your entire assignment for the first week, and we just did it in like 5 minutes. Okay, so yes, this recording, you guys, is going to be posted. So if you look, here, let's just go from the beginning. So byui.edu. That's not helpful. Let's try this one. byui.edu. Sign in. And I'll show you guys where you guys can find all of these. I don't know how you guys feel about this. I never use it. I guess I could have just clicked on Island right there. I'll try that. I'll try something new. All right. I come into our course. Click on syllabus. Detailed syllabus. And then in here, if you go down to where do I get help, this video spreadsheet right here is where I put all of our recordings and all of my videos. Okay, so I'm going to click on that. And right here, week 4 lecture, that'll be available to you in a couple hours whenever I put it in here, the recording from today. Okay, but you can see that I have completed walkthrough assignments of your assignments that will be unlocked after they're due. If you want to see me go through programming exercises, you totally can. This week 4 one, you should totally watch because it's really helpful to kind of set you up well for the rest of the summer. If you want to know how to use the developer tools better, I got 3 videos on how to use these developer tools that I always leave open when I'm developing code so that I can see errors and I can work with them if things aren't working the way they're supposed to be working. But yeah, so to answer your question, who just sent that to me, yes, this video will be posted. It will be available right here in the video spreadsheet. All right. Let's see here. What else do we got? Reserved words. You don't have to worry about this too much. It's more important to just be aware that they exist. All right. These are words that serve a specific purpose in JavaScript. Okay. Here's one that we just looked at, document. All right. Now, the reason why it's reserved and why this matters is because if I wanted to make a variable named document, I would have issues because there's already a variable named document in JavaScript. If I wanted to make a variable named if, it wouldn't let me. Or function, we've seen function too. Okay, that's another reserved word in JavaScript. These are all of our reserved words. Okay, and so anytime you want to make a function or you want to make a variable, you can't name it function, you can't name it switch, you can't name it document because these words are taken. Now, very rarely are you going to come across this issue, but it's really easy to see if you come into here and I look just at the color, look at function, look at the dark blue color, look at var. If I say if, notice it's like a purple color, and these variables are these light blue. Okay, so just your text editor will recognize these reserved keywords, and you'll be like, why is that purple? Maybe I shouldn't name it a variable. Okay, but if anything comes up like in light blue, okay, then you know that you're good to go. Okay. All right. Next up, debugging. Debugging is basically the process of fixing a broken program. Okay, so first you need to make sure that you save the file as an HTML file. That was like the first thing we talked about today when I was like writing some HTML code and it was all white and ugly. Okay, and as soon as I hit save and I saved it as a .html file, we had this beautiful syntax highlighting. And we even had some really nice things to like help complete our code. That's really nice. Okay, so that is only possible because it is saved as an HTML file. Next, validate it. So if we go to validator.w3. What was that link? .org. So validator.w3.org. And we come here. We looked at this last week, but I can say validate by direct input and just paste something in here. So I could paste our file and come over here and paste it and hit check. And it'll tell me, oh, look, we don't have any errors. It's actually really lucky. I'm surprised that we don't have any errors. But if there were errors, let's say I don't have that there, that'll throw an error. And well, I guess I can just delete it there. And I hit check. I'm surprised it didn't throw an error for that. I don't think it's refreshing this. So I'm going to copy this. And, oh, it's because I'm still in the same. Let me go back. Here, I'll say validate by direct input, and I'll paste that, and I'll hit check. Oh, maybe this thing's like, oh, working. Let's throw an error. Let's try that. Okay, so that one threw an error. Okay, so I have a body tag right here that opens, and then another one that opens instead of closing it. And it says start tag body seen, but an element of the same type was already open. Okay, so if you have HTML errors, they will show here. Now, what this checker won't check for you is JavaScript errors. All right, I could put something in here like var x equals 5 times 3 plus 2 plus something like that, which obviously you can't compute. Okay, but the W3 checker would not say anything about this. It'd be like, yeah, that's beautiful JavaScript, because it doesn't know JavaScript. It knows HTML. And so when you're checking for errors, just know that this will talk to you about HTML tags. Okay, like right here, it's saying, hey, there's 2 body tags. All right, but it will not give you any grief over JavaScript, for better or worse. All right. The sad thing is that you have to figure out your own way to validate your JavaScript, which is why right here I say check the JavaScript console, which is also why if I look over here, I have my console open. All right, this code worked beautifully. It did exactly what we wanted it to do. But if I was going to say, let's say that was uppercase, all right, and I said document.getElementById output greeting inner HTML equals greeting, okay, and I'm going to hit refresh. No errors in my console. Good to go so far. I'm going to put a name in here, and I'll say hello, and look at that. Now I got an error. If this wasn't open, I could push this all day, and I would never see anything, and it'd be really, 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 really frustrating because I'm like, there's no display below, and it should be. But if I hit F12, it's like, oh, look at all these errors from the 11 times that I clicked my button. And then I could look. It says get or cannot set property inner HTML of null at greet user. I can click on that, and it shows exactly where that's coming from. I can blow this up as much as I want. I'm not doing much with the body of my HTML. So it says we have an error right here. It says cannot find inner HTML of null, which means whatever is to the left of this period came back as null. It didn't find whatever I was telling it to look for. So I either know that there's a typo in one of these, or this doesn't exist. I could come into here and search for it, make sure that this is checked, that it's matching case, and it says 1 of 1. That's the only instance of this in my entire application, which isn't good. There has to be 2. There has to be 1 down in the body. And so I'd be like, oh, that has to be here in the div. And now it says 2 of 2. These match. And I can hit save and come back over here and just refresh. All right, I'll click on console, back down to 0 errors. Say Fred, say hello. Now look at that. That's interesting. Okay, this displayed on the page, but I have another error. It says adjective is not defined. Okay, that's from the arithmetic that we tried to do with this. The reason why this was displayed on the page was simply because it was executed first. All right, if I had put this down here and hit save, watch what happens. Okay, again, I have my console open, ready to rock. Fred is our name. That didn't get displayed because I broke my JavaScript code before that was executed. Okay, and so it's like, hey, that's not defined. I have to look at it. Be like, oh yeah, I meant to, say +1 or whatever. Come in here, say +1, hit save, make sure my JavaScript is good to go. Hit F5, type in my name, say hello, and I don't have any errors over here. Nothing in the console. Okay, so when I say use the JavaScript console, I cannot emphasize that enough. Okay, it's like trying to make cookies without a recipe for the first time. Like you have to use the console. I have been programming JavaScript for many years, and I never code without it open, because yes, if I have an error and it's not working, I can go back and I can look at my code, and I can examine every single line and be like, oh yeah, that's the error, and it took me a minute to find it. Well, if I run it with the console open, it'll take me half a second to find it because it shows up in bright red. So always have your console open. Right click, hit inspect, regardless of your browser, or hit F12. All right. By the way, I will teach how to use these developer tools in great depth this semester. And so I highly, highly encourage you to use Google Chrome, like I wrote in the syllabus. If you really want to learn how to use Internet Explorer's developer tools, go for it. And I'm sorry for you. But these are fantastic. So, all right, let's see what else we got. Use the JavaScript debugger. Okay. Again, I would point you to these videos. Okay, we've spent most of our time today in the console of the developer tools. But if you were to look at the sources tab of the developer tools, that is where I can actually see my code. Okay, when I had an error, it showed up here in bright yellow, showing me where my error was. But this is actually relatively interactive. So for example, if I click right there, I have this nice little blue thing popping up here and here. It's called a breakpoint. All right, I type in Susanna and hit say hello. I called my function. Look what it says right here. It says paused in debugger. Okay, so my code is in the middle of running. I just halted my computer on a dime. And I'm like, hang on, I want to look at stuff. Okay, and so right here, I can look at all sorts of different things. I have all this data over here. Okay, we have a call stack that says that we called the greet user function that was that event happened on an on-click element from line 20 in my HTML file. Okay, so I have the call stack to see how I got to this line of code. Right here, I have local, which shows different variables that have been declared in here. It says greeting and name are currently undefined because I haven't assigned anything to them yet because I paused it. All right. I can also hover over different things. So I can hover over document and look, there's everything inside of document that VS Code knew about. All right. In here, I'll find all sorts of stuff. Okay. Here's the URL of the file on my computer that's running. Here's the character set that we set in our HTML tag. What else do we got here? There's all sorts of stuff. Okay. Doc type is HTML. Okay. And like I said, 99% of this stuff you're never going to touch. All right. Of course, the last element child is HTML because that's all that's in here. Okay. So most of the stuff you're not going to touch. But one of these things that you're going to touch all the time is get element by ID. If I hover over that, it says, okay, this is a function. That's what that funky character means. And it's called get element by ID. All right. Now I can click and hold this whole thing to the closing parenthesis here and see what this would render. Okay. I just called that get element by ID function. As I highlighted that, the second I lifted off my mouse, it called that function. And now it says, oh, we found an input with an ID of username. Okay, it recognizes that this was an input. I didn't say anywhere in line 8 to find an input, but it recognizes that this is an input with an ID of username. And then in here, we have all these different attributes that we can use. Okay, max length, min length, local name, node name, offset top, offset width. That's just like styling like where it's located on my page. On key press, if I want it to do something when you press down on a key on it, you know, I could say send off a firework. Or on key up, you know, like there are all these different things that you could do with this input, with this HTML input. Most of it you'll never touch, okay? But it's all there. One of these things that is here though, whoosh, value, Susanna. That's what I typed in. That's all I care about, okay? And that's all you'll care about for the majority of your assignments, okay? Maybe if you get into some fancy styling, you know, you can do, oh, if the mouse hovers over this input, I want to make it bold, or I want to make it bigger, or something, and you can do that. But this value, this value down here will get us whatever the user typed in that input, and then we can use that. Okay, so same thing. If I hover over or highlight from value all the way to document, it says Susanna. All right, and this is all just paused in the debugger, which is fantastic. All right, if I hit F10, it'll go to my next step, and I can see that now name is defined. Name is Susanna. I can see that over here as well. If I hit F10 again, now it says greeting. Hi there, Susanna. Good morning. I can see exactly what it is. All right. I can see what X is going to be. It's 18. Not that I'm going to use it, but it's 18. All right. And I could look at each step of this arithmetic and be like, oh, that's 15. That's going to be 3, you know. And so by doing this, by having the debugger here, if I had a line of code that was not working, I checked W3 schools. It didn't have any errors because this is JavaScript. Everything looks fine. Everything matches up in VS Code. All my strings look like they're the same case and everything. Then I could use this debugger and be like, oh, you know, that's 18. It's actually supposed to be like 20. Or this greeting is supposed to be hi there, Susanna, but it's not showing anything. Then I can use this debugger to know exactly where my errors are coming from. And so this video in here kind of does something really similar to what I just did. It goes into a little bit more depth. But I would highly encourage you to practice using this debugger because it will save you a wealth of time in the long run because it'll help you find your errors faster. And anytime a student comes to me asking me a question about why something's not working, I grab their code, I save it on my computer, I run it with my developer tool open so that I can find their errors quickly. Any errors that are harder to find, I'll put a breakpoint inside of their function and I'll walk through it and be like, oh, it broke halfway through their function because of whatever. So that's kind of how you debug JavaScript. Okay. All right. I know there's a lot. How are you guys feeling? Some mixed emotions, it looks like. I'm happy for those of you who feel good. For those of you who feel stressed, just start practicing. Okay. Everyone's always like, how long does it take to learn this stuff? How fast am I going to get this down? And it's just the more you practice, the faster it'll come. And so just start just like last week. You made a simple HTML file, start with that, and then add a script tag and try experimenting with a function. If you want to Google HTML function call, okay, we have W3 schools pop up here. That's just in JavaScript. I wonder if I can find an HTML. Just follow the book, okay? All these will teach you how to call functions, but the book is laid out really simply to say, hey, here's a button. You have an on-click attribute to call a function in your JavaScript, and then you can work with it. So, all right. Any questions or anything you guys want to see? We could do, how much time do we have? Do we have 9 minutes left? We're over time. Oh man, no one even told me. You guys, I'm so sorry. You guys don't even have to.
Just excited to learn.
You guys aren't like graded on attendance or anything. But anyways, I'm sorry that I went over. Hopefully this is helpful for you guys. If you want to see me doing another program, like I said, watch this video. Okay, this is exercise 3 in this chapter, is to put together a template program that you can use for the rest of the semester. And if I was just going to show you my template program real quick, that is not what it looks like. That's awful. You should watch my video. Okay, this is my template. You'll notice that I have a function being called that gets a value from an input, prints out something to the page of a div. And so then anytime I want to start up a new assignment, I just copy this whole thing and I'll change it. This is no longer a template function. This is a calculate volume function. And this will be a radius, and but I can just kind of build off of this. And so I would recommend that you watch this and these Chrome developer tools as well, because they'll really help you out. So, all right. Well, I'll let you guys go. If you have any questions, post on the help channel. I'll be happy to help you guys out.
I had a quick question. Just understanding more with JavaScript, the difference between like dynamic and static. Are we going to learn more about that later on? Or I